Hello, welcome to the Sawalha-Adderleys. This is a standalone chat about a sort of evolution in the Israel-Palestine crisis. It's a focus on a news story that's breaking this morning. Apologies, there hasn't been a coffee moaning yet today. There will be one later today. But this is just a focused look at an announcement made by Bezalel Smotrich. He's the double act. The settler double act. You've got one who's the sort of rabied frog spawn of a radioactive Gordon Ramsay. That's Ben-Gvir, eyes popping out on stalks, forever standing outside mosques rather than restaurants, slapping his hand, looking to the left and telling us just how much he wants to settle Palestine and get rid of the Gazans and all that kind of stuff. I think he's their security minister, and Ben-Gvir has the odd kind of accolade of being too extreme for even the IDF. So that tells you what we're dealing with here. This isn't just a Netanyahu problem. This is an Israeli government problem. The other one is a sort of slightly more sort of debonair looking one. The other kind of settler lunatic is this guy, Bezalel Smotrich, who is their finance minister, Israel's finance minister. So Bezalel Smotrich, I call him the Paul Rudd. Sorry for any fans of Paul Rudd. He's almost the Paul Ruddian of the two, him and Ben-Gvir. Well, he said today that, or it's being quoted in the Times of Israel, that he plans and Israel plans to expand Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Now, of course, all of our eyes are on Gaza, and we know what's coming in there. We know what's about to happen. It's the final solution. Netanyahu's gone on the record as saying his Greater Israel plan is he's on a mission from God. He literally must have watched the Blues Brothers recently and is on a mission from God. He's just lacking the shades because he's certainly lacking the talent, the grace, the charisma, or the humanity. So as he kind of pounds away at Gaza, we all prepare for the awfulness of what's about to unfold there. We have to have the bandwidth. It's a phrase that's used. I don't have the bandwidth for this. I don't have the bandwidth to kind of cater for Middle Eastern problems. It's complicated. It's not complicated at all. It's very simple. The reason you want it to be complicated is so you don't have to fucking get engaged with it and actually say, oh my God, this is so wrong. So in the West Bank, which remember, Hamas doesn't run. So the Israelis are kind of it's a slightly tricky one for the Israelis because they can't just keep pointing the finger at a prescribed terrorist group. Though if you do resist the settlers, you are simply described as a terrorist. So it doesn't stop them, and it's not stopping them now because Bezalel Smotrich has approved tenders or applications for more than 3,000 housing units in an area which is controversially called the E1 settlement, which is between Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim. In the West Bank. I'm going to show you a map animation that from Al Jazeera that gives you a really good sense of why this is really significant. Because if they go ahead with this, they are ostensibly and essentially, not completely, but geographically splitting the West Bank in two. You have to view these settlements, these illegal settlements, like a virus. It's like a virus that's encouraged by settlers who are a curious band. You've seen Daniela Weiss, the woman who was interviewed that Louis Theroux met in the Settlers documentary. They're a strange sort of fusion. There's troglodyte in there. There's kind of old-fashioned, almost Amish-like pioneer sort ofness in there from America. There's that whole idea of the frontier and sending peoples sort of ahead of you who aren't actually that intelligent, because if they were intelligent, they might be a little bit afraid or think, I don't entirely think this is right what we're doing. So there's a huge sort of aspect of stupidity. They've not been bitten by rabid dogs, but when you look at the footage, many of them have. There's no justification. It's entirely illegal. Bizarrely, it's still illegal. Many of these settlements are still illegal, even in Israeli law, but Israel simply doesn't enact the law. So they're a kind of tolerated extremist group that for the Israeli regime do a lot of dirty work because actually they're all a bit fucking batshit crazy. And then another element you need to add into their sort of DNA is a sort of hillbilly, gibbering, the hills have eyes madness, I think is the only way to describe it. They go into Palestinians' houses, they take their property, they take their fridges, they take their tables, they lock the doors, they throw people out, they cut down their trees, and they pop up barriers. Well, Bezalel Smotrich has approved, as I say, 3,000 more in this controversial part of the West Bank, which is another huge step when and if they go ahead, and it looks like they probably will, to sort of, if you like, separating or splitting into the West Bank. In fact, let me show you the video now with the commentary from Al Jazeera, because it was a really good grab on the geographical significance.
The only internationally recognized boundary between Israel and Palestine is known as the Green Line. But in 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank. And since then, it has annexed Jerusalem and has built illegal settlements in and around occupied East Jerusalem. And you can see them in blue. In 2002, Israel started building a separation wall around them, cutting them off from the rest of the occupied West Bank. And you can see that separation wall, that's in red there. And this is known as the E1 plan, and it aims to create, as we said, more than 3,000 illegal Israeli settlement units. If implemented, the plan would connect the illegal Israeli settlements with Israeli annexed Jerusalem, cutting deeper into the West Bank.
When you look at this map and you see those blue areas just getting larger and larger, the analogy that really kind of reaches me is cancer. It's like a tumor. And these have been going on for years. So when we're all frustrated with our government, when they say things like we're gravely concerned or we'd like Israel to reconsider in Gaza, it's only because we were all aware that the West's appeasement and lack of kind of, bravery has allowed this to happen, that makes us really quite concerned that Gaza, in a weird way, is like the West Bank on acid. It's in time lapse. It's sped up. It's happening much more furiously. And the reason it's happening much more furiously and fast is because there's the constant excuse of Hamas that Israel can point the finger at. To quote Bezalel Smotrich, he says, approval of construction plans in E1 buries the idea of a Palestinian state. So, in saying this, he's also stating that it completely destroys the possibility of a Palestinian state. And he says, and continues, the many steps we're taking on the ground as part of the de facto sovereignty plan that we began implementing with the establishment of this government. After decades of international pressure and freezes, we are breaking conventions, basically being illegal, and connecting Ma'al Adumim to Jerusalem. This is Zionism at its best, building, settling, and strengthening our sovereignty in the land of Israel. So this plan has for decades been put on pause or has been postponed because of opposition within the international community, because there is a belief that it will divide the West Bank into the north and south, basically, with once again, and that's what's happened in Gaza. Israel, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. So the rhetoric coming out of Israel, the rhetoric coming out of Netanyahu's mouth, where he's on a spiritual mission, Greater Israel, they feel so emboldened. And it's almost like the more there's international outcry, bar America, the more they double down on the extremities of their intentions and their prejudice and their ambitions. All the while knowing that Trump will back them up and support them. We're heading towards a really sticky conclusion, not just in Gaza and the West Bank, but how is the world, how are the Western governments going to be able to float this with an electorate or with voters or with populations that watch the potential completion of a genocide, the potential completion of the removal of a Palestinian state? If there is no Palestinian state, despite Western nations saying they will recognize them, and they recognize Palestinian statehood, but there's actually now no Palestinian state to recognize, how do the governments of the West expect to proceed?